Welcome back to Kings of Columbus on the podcast. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Mega preview, Landis, Ohio State, Iowa. We like it when it's a game worthy of a mega preview, yes?
Yeah, these are my favorite episodes to do. Yeah, I like all of our episodes, but these are my favorites. So I have to be honest.
I like mixing it up. I like it when the game is worthy of it. And not to be like weird about it, but there was a national college football writer who told us that last year when he was coming to cover an Ohio State game, that he listened to our mega preview of Ohio State and the opponent before the game when he was like out walking around Columbus, and it like helped him get ready for the game. And that's like a national college football writer. So like we don't do this show for national college football writers, although hello to any of them who are listening. We do it for our audience, but we want that. Like, hey, I'm fired up for Ohio State, Iowa. It is a 20-point spread. It's not like it's a coin flip game, but it's a game. So, hey, I'm going to go walk the dog. I'm going to get on the treadmill. I'm going to do the dishes. I'm going to vacuum the house. I'm going to, whatever, do some laundry. I'm going to go drive somewhere. And I'm excited to put this on because I really want to get into this game. Yeah, like you're going to re-listen to it. You're going to be like, oh, man, George and I are going to go for a walk and I'm going to listen to myself talk about Phil Parker. And how good will you feel? Hey, hello to Bill listening to himself. What's up, man?
That's nice. Thanks for saying hi to me. Yeah, I don't know that typically we'd give a game with the spread like this one this kind of treatment, but this I think that the schedule that Ohio State has played thus far has kind of led us to here, right? Because it does, whatever you think of the spread, this feels to me very much like a game that's going to answer some questions about Ohio State, and I'm excited about that, right? So we want to kind of set the table in a more meaningful way than we have the previous 4 games.
And Iowa's a weird team because they do 2 things really well. The things they do well, they do as well as anybody in the country. And the things they don't do well, they do as well as the 8th best team in the MAC. So it's an odd... But the other thing is, and for people who watch this show and also watch Kings of the North, this is going to be our big game breakdown on Kings of the North on Thursday. Like, we think this is the most interesting game in all of Northern football. There's Syracuse, UNLV, and there's Washington, Michigan, and there's West Virginia. Who's West Virginia playing? Oklahoma State, right? There's some other stuff, right? But this also rises to the level. Rutgers, Nebraska is interesting, but this is a game that matters for a lot of people. So if you listen to Kings of the North, we'll do it'll be a separate breakdown. It'll be a little bit shorter, but it'll be similar to this. But here we're super diving in. We broke it up both sides of the ball. We do have a texter survey that we're going to save until the end, Landis, where I got well, actually, there's a couple questions we'll answer here. We also have some texter comments about facing Iowa. Kirk Ferentz 2-9 all time versus Ohio State. And I'm sure every Ohio State fan can name, well, maybe not. They name the most recent win that Iowa has over Ohio State.
Sure.
I bet a lot of them can name the other one. And then there were a couple close games in there. They might remember those close games more than they remember the other Iowa win. But we'll have some texter comments. But like the 8 remaining games, we asked, rank them from toughest to easiest on Ohio State's schedule. So that gives us a little peek at what people are thinking about Michigan, Penn State, Oregon, Nebraska, Indiana, and where Iowa fits into that. Yeah. So we are interested in that at the end of the show as well. But we're going to start with the breakdown. And
can I ask you a question before that?
Nope, we got to go right into the breakdown. You said you want to talk ball. No questions. No, go ahead. This
is a ball question, because you just said like I think this is the best game in the country this week. Like not just the North. There are no ranked versus ranked matchups unless I'm forgetting one. Big noon's going to UCLA, Penn State. Game day's going to Berkeley for Cal versus Miami. And like I know that Iowa's not ranked, but like so many people, like what I've sampled of national podcasts, so many people are like, well, Ohio State hasn't played anybody. We'll talk about Ohio State when they play somebody. It's like they're playing somebody this week.
Oh.
And I don't know that the game's been talked about that way. Like Jerry Emig was asking me, I was talking to him at the press conference on Tuesday, and I said, like, I think this is the biggest game of the week, but no one's talking about it like that. And even like Stuart Mandel at The Athletic tweeted something this week where it was like, boy, CBS is sure getting some big time games. It had Michigan, USC, and it's going to get USC, Penn State, and just like totally glossed over this one that is also on CBS at 3:30. And it's just a little odd to me that this game is not getting more attention, because I really think that it should be.
It's odd to you that national media is glossing over the North?
Well, it's Ohio State.
It is Ohio State, but they're wrapped up in Ole Miss. Who's Ole Miss play this week? Do you know? Does Ole Miss play a high school team? They favored against a high school team this week?
Ole Miss plays South Carolina.
So Ole Miss is like in the playoffs still. Ole Miss is like, Ole Miss, South Carolina, the team that beat Kentucky against the team that lost to Kentucky. Oh my God. I'm not going to do that on this show. I say that for the other show. It's not fair to do that to this audience. This is a great game. This is, it might not be a great game. It is an interesting game to look into because of this of the particular things. And so we do it like we do on this show, where we split it up, both sides of the ball, and we're going to start with William Robert Landis. What are you, Edward? James?
Michael.
Yeah. William Michael Landis. Ohio State offense run game versus the Iowa run defense is where we start. What you got?
Yeah, this is, at least on paper, very much like strength on strength here, right? Ohio State is number 3 in the country in yards per carry, nearly 2.5 yards better than last year. Like I don't, we've talked about like how cool the run game looks. I don't know that we've discussed really at length just how much better statistically this run game has been compared to last season. Like 2.5 yards is a pretty big improvement for yards per carry for Ohio State. So they're number 3. Iowa's defense is number 5. Allowing fewer than 3 yards per carry, and Iowa's defense is working on 7 consecutive seasons of allowing fewer than 4 yards per carry. It has just been a remarkably consistent and efficient run defense. Now, it has not faced what I would consider a potent rushing attack just yet. Like, it faced Iowa State, which has had trouble kind of running the ball against everybody it's played. And it has faced Minnesota, which has a very good running back in Darius Taylor, but not a particularly good offensive line. So Iowa held both those teams under 100 yards and has held every opponent it's faced this year under 100 yards. So I am interested in the test for Ohio State because I think that it is one. This is certainly the best run defense it has seen this year. Chip Kelly said he thinks this is the best coach defense Ohio State will play all season. Which I thought was interesting because Penn State and Michigan are still coming and they play Oregon next week. But it's high praise for Phil Parker. Coaches like Phil Parker, coaches like coaches. Yeah. But it's deserved. It's just a really sound defense. But I do wonder if the on paper statistics for Iowa's run defense are perhaps slightly misleading just based off who it's played. But I suppose you could say the same thing about Ohio State's rushing offense based off who it's played. And last week, Ohio State played Michigan State. And like down to down was not as efficient running the ball as it had been in the previous 3 games. So there's stuff to learn about both sides of the ball here. Exactly how good and potent and efficient and explosive is Ohio State's rushing offense. And then the same thing for Iowa's rushing defense. Just like what's real, or is this maybe something less than we're accustomed to seeing from Iowa?
Do you think this is super chess matchy with Chip Kelly and Phil Parker? Especially in the run game, in the types of runs, and because like when we get to the other side of the ball, I think like Iowa this year, they have a great back, but also like the run plays they're calling at specific times and how they're setting up the run and that kind of thing. I think there's some real creativity there. I would imagine Chip lives for this stuff.
Yeah,
right?
It was funny.
The art and science of going against a Phil Parker type.
I very much got the vibe from Chip that he was pretty excited about going up against Phil Parker. He was asked, which I thought was funny, like, how do you know when you get inside a defensive coordinator's head? And Chip said, well, I don't think about it that way because if I'm thinking about that, then he's in my head. So I don't approach it quite that way. But he did I think use the word chess match in an answer talking about this matchup. I think it's with the offense in general, I suppose. Like there's some stuff in the passing game, obviously, that Ohio State can get into that's designed a little differently. But I do think Chip is very much like week to week, I'm going to throw something new at you. Like we're always going to layer something on top of what we've already done that probably you're not ready for, which is an interesting juxtaposition to Iowa, which has done the same thing defensively for like 20 years, with the exception of switching from like they were a 4-3 base for a long time and now they're more of a 4-2-5. But in terms of like all the coverages and the way they go about things and the way they answer questions within their defense, like all of that has been the same basically since Kirk Ferentz has been there. So it's worked, right? So why change it? So that is now going up against the ultimate sort of, I think, kind of bespoke offense week to week that Chip Kelly has brought to Ohio State. And it should be fascinating to see what one's out there.
That's one of those words that I don't know what it means. What does bespoke mean?
Like tailored to, like individually tailored to, I don't know. There's probably a more elegant definition.
No, I don't think there.
Like a bespoke suit is like a suit that is made specifically for you.
Is that a new word? Is that a new word in the past 5 years? I feel like I never heard that word before. Now it's here.
I don't think so.
We're using it on a football show. Really? God, I gotta
think,
learn
well,
more
no,
words.
I think it's more like, I think it is more out in the world because like, bespoke is used in like in a lot of different areas now, like like restaurants and like boutique clothing shops and stuff. I do think it's probably out there more.
And football schemes?
And now football schemes. Yes.
Now football schemes.
This is the last horizon for them.
In doing a ton of Caleb Johnson stuff, and for people who do watch and listen to Kings of the North, Caleb Johnson, the Iowa running back, last week we talked about him as a very legitimate Heisman candidate, and we thought nobody was talking about him in that way, and he should be talked about that way. And we may or may not have him on Kings of the North later this week. Mostly in stats and the way he's used and the way he's run. I'm not necessarily talking about like body type or anything. I think a pretty good comparison this year for Caleb Johnson is Quinshon Judkins. That there's a lot of stuff that you go through, and most of it is like breaking tackles, yards after contact, like running through guys kind of thing. Could this, not that it's just going to be hard, I think, for Ohio State to have like a great Heisman candidate. They might end up with a guy in New York, but they're going to split the vote so many different ways.
Yeah.
And they've both been, Quinshon and Trevion have both been very, very good so far. But there's going to be a lot of Caleb Johnson talk justifiably. Could this be a Quinshon goes crazy, or Quinshon reminds people how good he is, or when we get out of this, people who have not been talking about Ohio State are talking about, is Quinshon Judkins one of the 3 best running backs in the country? Is that on the table?
I think so. I mean, I would say that it's probably on the table for either of the 2 backs, right? It's not, I don't know that. I guess I don't know. They've been like similarly good to me, right? Yeah. So I don't know that I would say like it's definitely time for the Quinshon show. I think, or maybe it's both, right? Maybe, and it's more to your point, right? That they don't have a great Heisman candidate because there's too many of them.
Right.
Maybe it's people come out of this game because I don't know. There was a lot of preseason talk about like, oh, Ohio State has the best backfield in college football, and then I just don't think a lot of people have watched Ohio State. So this could be the reminder that like, oh yeah, like what we thought about this team coming into the season is definitely true. Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson are going to be pretty hard to stop for everybody.
How much is Jay Higgins, the linebacker, the All-American candidate at linebacker for Iowa, like a run game stopper here? Is he going to have 17 tackles in this game?
Yeah, he could. He was third, or what I have written down here. Make sure I'm right. He was third in the power conferences among power conference defenders, last year, in stops on PFF, which is like you make a play that results in a negative or an unsuccessful play for the offense. So he was really good at that last year. He's not quite at the same rate this year, but he's still really good. So like Jay Higgins, Nick Jackson, the linebackers are excellent. The interior of the defensive line for Iowa is good. Like Aaron Graves, I think is a real problem in the middle of that defensive line. Yaya Black is 317 pounds. It's a lot of man to try to move around. This is very much a whatever spotlight showcase game, I think, for Ohio State's interior offensive line. And there was some discussion about that on Tuesday. So like it needs to be a big Seth McLaughlin game. It needs to be a big Donovan Jackson game. And then that makes what's happening at right guard a little more interesting because Ohio State played Tegra Shabola and Austin Saraveld both last week against Michigan State, has done it the last 2 weeks. And I guess ideally you'd like for this to be a game where you can continue doing that. But I am wondering whether or not this defensive front might be too good for that. So then if you feel like you need to settle on one, who is that guy? Because I think it could be either one based off how they both played this year. But I think Austin Saraveld played a little better than Tegra did last week too. So I think potentially you could see a new starter at right guard for Ohio State. But regardless of who it is, it's like we're gonna learn about whether or not those guys are ready because there are real dudes on the other side on that defensive line.
Do you have any sense, based on what Phil Parker likes to do, on whether Iowa's going to put a bunch of guys in the box and stop the run and make Ohio State throw, or whether you think they're going to play back and play that 4-2-5 and dare Ohio State to run?
I don't. I mean, they do. They'll play a 4-3. If you look at some of their snap counts, like there's a third linebacker who's played like 100 snaps.
Okay.
it's a lot of Sebastian Castro, who's like the nickel safety, who will come down in the box and like play as a third linebacker, similar to what we've seen from Ohio State with Lathan Ransom or even Jordan Hancock at times. And then when they're in a 4-3, Sebastian Castro will stay on the field and they'll just bump back and play half field safety.
Okay.
So they'll probably throw both at them. I think Iowa likes to sort of like keep integrity within its front seven. So I'd imagine they'll almost always be 7 guys in the box. I don't think they'll play with a light box against Ohio State. We can talk about the pass game versus the Iowa defense. Like there have been some holes in that pass defense for Iowa that maybe might make you think that they'll perhaps be a little more keyed in on the pass, but I don't think so. I think Iowa's going to show up looking to stop the run, whether that's in the 4-3 or the 4-2-5. I think they're going to have 7 guys down there more often than not.
There was a hole in that pass defense that lost him a game that we'll talk about.
Yeah.
What is your level of faith, scale of 1 to 10, in Ohio State's offensive line to do what needs to be done in the run game, specifically against a defense like this?
I'm like I think they've been very good, but I'm still at like a 7, maybe.
Okay. I mean, if 7 feels kind of low, they're in a good spot.
Yeah, I'm at a 7, and I feel like I'm maybe a little low on that. So yeah, that's
okay. Which is, I don't know. Would we have guessed in October the offensive line in the run game against a defense like Iowa will be at a 7, and that feels low? I mean, if you had said like, I don't know, they might be at a 3.5. I mean, I know they had a good camp, right? But I have had almost all of my offensive line concerns eased. Maybe not vanquished, but certainly eased in a world. God, I really do it a lot. That was the number one thing. I say in a world a lot. That's why I did that. Yeah. And the number one thing coming into the season of like a national championship level team is what's the number one concern is the offensive line. And we're not going into this game against a very good defense. Listen, man, they're a top 10 defense. Is that Iowa has a top 10 defense? True or false?
True.
Should anyone be freaked out about Ohio State's offensive line going into this matchup?
I don't think so, because I think the things too that it'll be a good test of exactly how good they are at run blocking. Because like I said, Michigan State did some stuff I think that come up the works a little bit last week.
Okay,
and that is worth sort of keeping in mind. But I think as the game went along too, Ohio State got a little better at that, and the pass protection has been very good. And also Iowa's not a team that like really gets after quarterbacks all that much, and it doesn't blitz. So I'm still at a place where the thing that would worry me the most about Ohio State's offensive line is teams that have really good edge rushers and teams that really bring the heat. And Iowa is super sound and stout on defense, but I don't know that it's checking either of those 2 boxes. So I'm not majorly concerned going into this game.
Okay. Sounds good. What do you think we're both doing here with these shirts? This mustard feels very fall-y to me today with us.
Yeah, it's a little chill in the air, I thought, right?
Yeah. Well, mustard.
You want to break out a mustard? Yeah. The brown palette, I think, gets brought out when it feels like this.
Yeah. That was the alternate name for this podcast on the podcast, a brown palette. See, if you're only listening on podcast right now and you're not watching on YouTube, this should draw you to YouTube. Oh man, how brown is their palette? How brown is their palette? How brown? Let's go to Ohio State pass game versus Iowa pass defense. And the thing that I mentioned, and just for this, I went back and I just watched my side of the ball, but I watched a little bit of the other stuff. I watched the full Minnesota game and I watched the full Iowa State game, and I watched nothing of Troy and Illinois something. What is it? Illinois State? Eastern Illinois? Illinois State.
Yeah, and Illinois. And FCS Illinois.
Yeah, right. And FCS Illinois. I didn't watch a single play of either of those because I didn't care, just as a heads up. So I don't know what they did against those teams. They won, but that has nothing to do with what they're going to do against Ohio State. Mm-hmm. What did you do? How did you prep for this?
I watched a little bit of everything. Troy, because the thing you want to talk about with Iowa's pass defense is that it's given up some explosive passing plays.
Yeah.
Troy hit 2 of them. Troy got behind them twice for 60-yard touchdowns.
So the one that is devastating is Sebastian Castro, who you mentioned, who is a highly regarded defensive back, right? Is he not? Iowa State beat Iowa because they got the ball back like at the 25-yard line with 45 seconds left, and they hit a 30-yard, is it a slot wheel? I don't know what the route would be, but Jalen Noel just absolutely smoked Sebastian Castro. He was open by 5 yards with 30 seconds left down the sideline for a 30-yard gain that single-handedly set up the game-winning 54-yard field goal. And if they cover that play, Iowa's undefeated right now. And I was like, oh, man, who gave that up? And it's Sebastian Castro. I was like, oh, my gosh. It was basically one-on-one coverage. And it's just a single play, and like everybody makes mistakes, but it's the biggest play of their season. And I was like, Jalen Noel's awesome. But anyway, like, I don't know. I watched that and I was like, oh, okay. That feels like a thing that Emeka Egbuka could do in this game, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's quite possible that Iowa can't cover Ohio State, which is like not saying it's Ohio State, of course, right? But with a defense like this and its track record, I just don't know that there's enough there. Like, I like Sebastian Castro a lot. I probably like him more as a run defender than I do as a guy in coverage. And their one corner, Jamari Harris, has been pretty good this year, but their other corner, TJ Hall, is the one who's been getting picked on a little bit. He gave up the two big ones against Troy. I think he gave up another big one against Iowa State. So, and like, it's just like Cooper DeJean's not there, right? Like they have good players. Xavier Wampa's safety is an excellent player. Ohio State recruited the crap out of him. They really wanted him. Like he's a very good player. But I don't know if at cornerback Iowa can hold up here. And if Iowa also is not getting after Will Howard, because it doesn't really do that against anybody, Iowa is 106th in the country in pressure rate, and they don't blitz. So maybe they'll show up blitzing. That the one unknown element in this, for as much as we talk about Iowa just doing what it does, they were off last week. So they've had a lot of time to think about this and could bring some different stuff to the table that Ohio State is not necessarily anticipating and might have to kind of feel out a little bit. But I don't know if that's what Iowa is defensively anyway. So the kind of the big picture of Iowa's defense, I don't know if it lends itself to performing all that well, I guess, against Ohio State's passing attack. Now, Ohio State hasn't thrown the ball down the field a ton. And I know people have been mildly concerned about that, I suppose, is the best way to put it. So we'll see whether or not Will Howard can make Iowa pay if it can't cover Ohio State's receivers down the field. But this is just not an Iowa passing defense that we're used to seeing. It's 54th in the country in passing efficiency defense right now. It's been top 10 every year. It was top 10 every year from 2020 to 2023 and top 5 the last 2 years. Now, part of that is also you play in the Big Ten West. The numbers get propped up a little bit, but it still has been a pretty sound passing defense, and it hasn't been bad, but by its own standards, there's been a drop off. So it just feels like a place that Ohio State might be able to attack.
So this is the situation where, and I'm stealing a little bit from the coaching conversation we'll have later, but there was a time in the Tressel era and even in the Urban era to an extent, more the Tressel era, but where Iowa and Ohio State weren't mirror images of each other, but Tressel and Ferentz were trying to win the same way with defense and special teams and a particular kind of offense most of the time. Now, Troy Smith got dropped in the middle of that, and Ricky Stanzik got dropped in the middle of that too. So, but in that situation, that's where Iowa was competitive with Ohio State. But then, of course, they did, the win in 2017 when Ryan Day was the offensive coordinator and Urban Meyer was the head coach. But that still wasn't the full evolution of the modern Ohio State offense. And Ryan Day and Kirk Ferentz have only gone against each other once so far, which is kind of odd. And this is Ryan Day's 6th year. He only played Kirk Ferentz once. And they dropped 54 on him 2 years ago in Ohio Stadium. And so I do think it's possible that everything that Iowa's been the same for 20 years. But Ohio State evolved. And the previous version of Ohio State, especially offensively, was something Iowa could handle. And I think maybe this version of Ohio State offensively, when it is operating fully and when you're not trying to have JT Barrett be the guy running this passing offense, I think might be the thing where, remember those days when Iowa could compete with Ohio State and now Ohio State just throws all over them, even though Phil Parker is still great. It's just a terrible matchup, maybe particularly here.
Yeah. I kind of feel the same way, but I guess the question that comes with that is, what's Will Howard going to bring to the table as a passer, right? Because I don't know. Ohio State is still it's a heavy RPO passing attack. It's a heavy play action passing attack. Will Howard has been, I think, really accurate on like intermediate throws, especially like last week against Michigan State. I thought that was really impressive. Short to intermediate, he's been very accurate. Down the field, and again, it's not even that I'm worried about it. It's just an unknown commodity. They haven't had to do it. And I'm not saying like the way to beat Iowa is you just keep throwing it over their heads, although maybe Ohio State will be able to do that and Will Howard will be fine. But it's not like they hung a 54, I think, with a defensive touchdown in that game with CJ Stroud at quarterback. So CJ Stroud in that game was 20 of 30 for 286 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick. We'll see whether or not Will Howard can attack what feels like some of the deficiencies within Iowa's defense. I think that he can. I'm not super worried about it, but I think the interesting thing with this matchup, pass game versus Iowa's pass defense, is how Iowa defends the RPO stuff, because I think they have a pretty good plan for that. There's a really interesting video from, I think it's like 4 or 5 years ago. It was like Urban Meyer's first year when he was doing the Big Ten Network stuff. It's him and Jerry DiNardo talking about how Iowa defends RPOs and the specific plan they have for it and the way they trade off responsibilities with safeties and linebackers, or maybe in this case more of like the deep safety and the nickel if they're in a 4-2-5, and how it just confuses the reads for quarterbacks when they are trying to operate the RPO game. So Will Howard's been incredibly efficient in the RPO stuff and made the correct decision, I think, almost every time. And I said before that I think statistically Ohio State is the best RPO team in the country right now. They have the 7th most RPO attempts, according to Sports Info Solutions, and they lead the country in yards per attempt on RPOs among teams that have at least 20 attempts. They've been like awesome at it. But that's also been kind of the only thing they have to do against the teams they played so far. So if Iowa can take Ohio State out of that, then what's the next thing that Ohio State gets to? Because I just don't think Ohio State's been in that situation yet.
Okay. What do you think is going to happen? Like your prediction, your game script for this side of the ball matchup.
I think Iowa is going to be keyed in on stopping the rushing attack and perhaps might even not shut it down, but make Ohio State really work for it, but that they won't be able to contend with the receiver. Like eventually the receivers are just going to break through, and that'll be how Ohio State wins the game. They'll just, whether that's off of play action or RPOs or Will Howard showing us something down the field that he hasn't shown us yet. I think the matchups on the outside favor Ohio State pretty substantially, and that's what will win Ohio State the game.
Okay. I did ask the tech subscribers, both sides of the ball on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your confidence level in Ohio State? So for the Ohio State offense-defense matchup, I use the Brian Fremeau numbers. By those numbers, Ohio State has the number 2 offense, and Iowa has the number 6 defense. Scale of 1 to 10, confidence in Ohio State. What do you think the average was for the Texters, Landis?
8.1.
8.09. Look at you. What a day. You with your brown palette, your favorite kind of show, and you're absolutely nailing the picks. This is a Landis kind of day. Go get some pumpkin spice after the show, brother. You were.
I had some this morning already. I've already put down a pumpkin cream cold brew. We're good.
Bill Landis, powered by pumpkin. Look, this is just what an October we have on tap. It's been a weird September. What an October ahead. How could you not be part of Kings of Columbus? Get on board. Landis is in form. You're a fall guy, right? You're all about fall.
Yes, I am very much a fall guy, which makes me sad that like fall doesn't exist anymore. We're like, oh, it's a crisp fall day. What's the high? 75. Okay.
Yeah. That did make me sad. We had Pat Narduzzi on KOTN the other day, and I asked him what's his best snow football story, and he was like, yeah, climate change. There's no more snow football. That was like the realest climate change gut punch I've maybe ever had. Like, we kind of all know what's happening with the world. And when Pat Narduzzi, who's from Youngstown and has lived his entire life in the North, was like, there's no more snow football. I was like, should we save the planet and save snow football? That'd actually be a really good marketing campaign. For people who are maybe on the fence about that stuff, save snow football. Save fall. Bill Landis does not. That'd be the ad. It'd be you in a coffee shop getting a pumpkin spice and just being so happy in your brown pallet sweatshirt and just saying like, I love fall. And then you walk out the door and it's 91 and you start dripping sweat, drinking your pumpkin spice. It's like, save the earth, save fall, save Bill Landis. Oh, okay. Let's go to the other side of the ball. So 8.1, that's the confidence level, the Ohio State offense versus the Iowa defense. Let's go to the opposite side of the ball. We're going to start with the Iowa run game versus the Ohio State run defense. I thought this was one of the more remarkable stats that I've come across in a while. So this is Iowa's runs of 20 plus yards by season, going back as far as CFB stats went back. This is for the entire season. You ready? 2016, 18 runs of 20 plus, then 17, then 7 in 2018, then 15, 11, 15, and 9 last year. No, 9 and then 13. 18, 17, 7, 15, 11, 15, 9, 13 for the whole year. Got those numbers locked in? You got them?
Got them.
Do you know how many they have this year so far in 4 games?
I know how many Caleb Johnson has. I don't know if there's more on top of that.
They have 14. They have more than last year in 4 games, and he has 12.
Yeah.
In 2022, they had 9 as a team for the whole year. Caleb Johnson has 12 in 4 games. That leads the country.
He has 12 and he only played the second half of the first game. He hasn't played the full game every week.
Ashton Jeanty has 10. That's second in the country. For comparison's sakes, Quinshon Judkins has 4 and Travion Henderson has 3. We've been talking about him a lot. There's a lot of comparisons. He is almost like Jeremiah Smith at running back because just in terms of like explosiveness, that this is such a weird run game because you can watch them at times and be like, oh, that was a stop on first down. Oh, that was a stop for 2 yards. And then he runs for 50 yards. And sometimes he's running through holes that are 10 feet wide. And sometimes he is running through a hole that doesn't exist and breaking 4 tackles. But it is remarkable. He's the 3rd highest graded back in the Power 4, according to PFF. Quinshon Judkins is actually number 2. 5.5 yards after contact per attempt, and Power 4 backs, only Jonah Coleman of Washington is higher. He's forced 30 missed tackles on 82 carries, according to PFF. I'm just using Judkins as a comparison because the past couple years at Ole Miss, he's one of the best running backs in the country at forcing missed tackles. Judkins forced 78 missed tackles last year and 76 as a true freshman. If Caleb Johnson has as many carries this year as Judkins had in those years, he'd have 100 missed tackles based on how many he's having right now. So like that's Quinshon Judkins is awesome at forcing missed tackles, and Caleb Johnson would have 25 more in a season than he has. He is rare, man, and he's from Ohio. That's going to be a storyline, but the real storyline is that when this guy gets downhill, Landis, it is trouble. And they really do like to run some like toss stuff with him that I feel like you don't see a ton of as much anymore. That, like a real kind of old fashioned toss that he's catching the ball 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage. But if he is at full, it takes him like 5 yards to get to full speed. So if you can kind of get him to chop his steps in the backfield a little bit, you can stop him. But if he gets going, it is trouble.
It's like the toss like into a mid-zone run. I think that's like the 49ers do it, if I can remember correctly. I think like when the 49ers like pitch the ball to Deebo Samuel, like this is the kind of stuff they're running. Okay. It is very odd, as you mentioned, because this is, I think, arguably the most explosive rushing attack in the country. The 14 runs of 20 yards or more are tied with Boise State and Army for the second most in the country, behind Washington State, whose quarterback runs around like a madman. So this is incredibly explosive, but then it's 75th in the country in rushing success rate. So it's like you get 1 yard or you get 50 yards.
It's not consistent.
It's really bizarre. And that's like that. Obviously, it's very much on Jim Knowles' mind. He was talking a lot on Tuesday about obviously tackling is important every game, but it is ratchet it up in this game when you have a guy like Caleb Johnson who forces as many missed tackles as he does, and then when he does it, he really makes you pay for it. And Jim Knowles was talking about not only tackling but knockback tackles, which is like you can hit a ball carrier, obviously the ball carrier still falls forward. He does not want Caleb Johnson getting hit at 2 yards and still getting 4 yards.
Okay.
So that because that's what Iowa, I'm sure, loves that it has this explosive element to its rushing attack this year. But Kirk Ferentz wants to be Army. Kirk Ferentz wants 3 yards at a time so they can have 3rd and short and then just get another first down and then keep getting 3.5 yards at a time until they're down into the red zone. And then they'll kick a field goal. That's fine because they held the ball for 8 minutes, right? That's what he wants to do. So if Ohio State's not tackling in a way that really limits those yards after contact, that's the recipe, I think, for Iowa to make this, uncomfortable or perhaps even spring an upset.
So the things here, a couple things that stand out for what it means for Ohio State. They will really hit you on short side runs to the boundary where they'll overload the field side with two or three receivers, suck up 3 or 4 defenders that way, and then lead. They're in 12 personnel almost all the time, by the way. So I don't even know what the numbers are. I added up the numbers. They have 2 tight ends on the field basically every time it matters, if it's not 3rd and 11. And they use those 2 tight ends as lead blockers. They're hammers. So they will run to the short side, lead with the 2 tight ends, and if one tight end takes out the linebacker on that side and the other tight end takes out the safety on that side, and the right tackle makes his block and seals the edge, and it is over before it begins. So there are situations where Ohio State needs to be really careful about. Sometimes people hate runs to the boundary, right? Because it's like, oh, you're running out of space. They will kill you because you run out of defenders. The second thing is don't blitz. There are some runs that they've hit where they run right at the blitz. And it's like, oh, what did you do? It's like, well, you blitzed the corner. The safety came down. They ran right past the blitzing corner, blocked the safety, and he was gone. So Iowa State got really ambitious after they were trying to come back against Iowa and blitz themselves right into a huge Iowa run play. So I think they have to be really careful. When we get to the pass game, I don't think there's a reason to blitz Cade McNamara, but also if you get caught in the wrong run play on a blitz, you're killing yourself. So I would be very cautious with that if I was Jim Knowles. And the other thing of this is such a huge Sonny Styles game. This is linebackers and safeties making tackles in space. This is, I've already talked, give me some Caleb versus Caleb Downs, Caleb Johnson. I'm excited for it. But if you are the will linebacker and you have a free shot at this guy and you don't bring him down, that's the difference between a 3-yard game and a 30-yard gain. And so it is going to be constant. And I think I would have 3 linebackers on the field almost all the time, because they are constantly in 12 personnel. Put Arvell Reese in the middle and give me Cody Simon and Sonny Styles running to the ball, and Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs running to the ball behind them. Those 4 guys have to tackle, or Iowa's going to do what they've done.
I think that's what you're going to get. I asked Jim Knowles on Tuesday, is it automatic when they're in 12 personnel, you go to 4-3? And he didn't say it's automatic. He said there have been times in his past where he has played against 12 personnel still in their base nickel defense, but that was mostly because he had to, and he doesn't feel like he has to do that here. So I am in I don't think you should take Jordan Hancock off the field camp, but I think Jim Knowles is very much of the mindset of, we have 3 linebackers that can play. We're going to put them out there when we're playing a team like this. So I think you will see Ohio State start in a 4-3 and probably stay in it for the majority of the game, unless it's a pure passing down. So I don't. Okay, you might see Jordan Hancock play 20 snaps in this game, maybe. Maybe that's high. He only played 19, I think, against Michigan State. So, yeah, that is the position. The linebackers specifically, like safeties, yes, because they're obviously the last line of defense, and also they play with those guys so fast downhill that they're often playing like linebackers anyway. So Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs definitely need to tackle. Caleb Downs has been a sure tackler the last 3 weeks. Lathan Ransom has been pretty sure tackler all year. The linebackers, obviously, less so. Sonny Styles in particular. So there's a lot of belief in Sonny. There were a lot of Sonny questions on Tuesday. Like, do you think he's progressing the way that he should be? like level of confidence stuff. And every Ryan Day and Jim Knowles both said, like, we like what he's done. He's a young guy who's still learning a new position. There's going to be some speed bumps there, but they believe in his ability at linebacker. So there'll be the 3 out there, and then we'll see how they handle it. I think Ohio State will probably have Tyleik Williams back too for this game. So that's obviously another big piece of this. I don't think like Iowa's offensive line is overwhelming. Jennings Dunker, the right tackle, is pretty good.
He's the best one. He's the best one, but he's pretty best. Good. He's not going to maul you at the point. They don't maul you at the point of attack. This is sometimes when you talk about a run game, as you talk about it, the defensive tackles have to do this. I don't even know if Tyleik Williams matters that much, because that's not where they're going to hit you. They're going to hit you on the edge. And so they're already not that good. They lost the Iowa State game also because they got to the 3-yard line twice and had to kick field goals because they can't run the ball in the red zone. They have a Heisman candidate running back, and they're like, we can't run the ball from the 3-yard line because that's not what they do. So this is as much of a tackling in space linebacker safety game against a great running back as I can remember in a long time. Usually, I mean, like Tyleik Williams is just going to be chasing as Caleb Johnson runs wide when it really matters.
He runs. Caleb Johnson's good,
but not that well. They're not that good at it.
But some of his run, like he's like going through the B gap a lot, right? Like there's not a lot of, I think you're right that some of the bigger hits have been outside, but they're like I said, like a mid zone kind of team. It's not like they're running sweep all the time. Caleb Johnson will bounce runs for sure, and there have been a couple of runs that have been pretty deadly around that right side with Jennings Dunker and those 2 tight ends.
It just but again, like even those when he's broken those runs up the middle where he's going through the B gap, right? He's still running through the will linebacker or the middle linebacker who's coming up to make that hit, and he's stepping on their face and going.
Yeah, because the defensive tackle didn't win. But I think the thing Ohio State's defense did best last year was its defensive tackles made a ton of tackles, and Tyleik Williams especially. And I like, ideally, you're not letting Caleb Johnson get to your linebackers and safeties because a guy like Tyleik Williams is, one, eating up space, but also doing what he did last year. So I think Tyleik's return is huge here. And it's not just to be stronger at the point of attack or whatever. Maybe the guys who are playing in place of him haven't played all that great down to down. I just like Tyleik Williams' specialty is making plays at the line of scrimmage. And if you can do that, I don't know what else Iowa does offensively, because the numbers say, yes, this is a better Iowa offense. It's been all Caleb Johnson breaking tackles and running for 40 yards. If he cannot do that, Iowa can't score against anybody.
But if that's penetrating and make him chop his steps in the backfield, then that. But he's not going to be going at Tyleik Williams a lot. Their offensive line is pretty good. It's not great. They're all highly rated, right? In PFF, it's like they have the number 2 center, power 4, or in the Big Ten, number 2 center in the Big Ten, like the number 2 guard.
He's pretty good. Yeah.
Number 2 guard, Connor Colby. But Jennings Dunker is the guy who will really seal off the right edge and lead through. And they'll motion a lot. One of the big things is like Brian Ferentz didn't know you were allowed to move pre-snap. And Tim Lester, the new offensive coordinator, does a lot of motion. They love, again, the two tight ends so often. They had a play where they had 2 tight ends. They have like a play that it makes it look like the offense is like a fighter jet, that it's the tight ends are both offset off the tackles. So it makes it look like a wing kind of. So they were both in the slot, so it looked like they were 4 wide, and then they both motioned into that, and then one pulled and one led, and all of a sudden they had another one where they had Caleb Johnson out wide in an empty, and it's like, oh, they're empty, and then they motioned him back into the backfield and just handed him the ball. So they know they're doing different things. They know they're going to hand the ball to Caleb Johnson, but they're trying to trick you into thinking they're not going to hand the ball to Caleb Johnson, and then they're going to hand the ball to Caleb Johnson. So the tight ends, Luke Lachey and Addison Ostrenga, are really good blockers. And the linebackers and safeties at the point of attack are going to have to not get blocked all the time by those tight ends. That's going to be like the deal here. Because the other thing is, go ahead. Do you have another thing on run game?
I just want to ask you a question.
Yes.
Do you think we will see Iowa get into more quarterback run game with Brendan Sullivan, their backup QB, who they have played in the red zone a little bit?
Yeah,
but like along the lines of being off and being able to sprinkle a little something different into the offense, and also the success running the quarterback that Marshall and Michigan State had modestly. Like I am on alert for, here comes Brendan Sullivan to run the ball a little bit.
I think if they can't throw, which I think is going to happen, I think if they're trying to find variety and the pass game is not part of that variety, I do think we'll see it even more in the red zone. They motioned to tight end and handed off to the tight end in the red zone on one play. Like, they don't know what to do in the red zone. Like, it is quite a problem for them. And so I do think it felt like in the games that mattered, they weren't doing that quite as much. And it really was only red zone stuff. But I think they could throw it in. They need to get in a rhythm. Their offense only if it's you can feel it. I mean, every offense works this way, but the passing game only works if they break a big run and then they come back and on first down and run an RPO or a play action. That is the only time they complete any passes. So if they can throw Sullivan into that wrinkle, okay, Johnson ran for 6 yards. Now it's 2nd and 4. We're going to bring in Sullivan and try to do a little something right. I mean, sometimes that can throw off your rhythm. That would make sense to me. Again, talking about bye week, what are you going to do? I would not be surprised about that, because I don't know that I've ever seen a team less capable of dropping back and throwing a pass. They literally cannot throw the ball dropping back and throwing a pass. The only thing they can do is RPO or play action, where they are helping Cade McNamara sort of settle his feet and giving the defense a little bit of a look. And when they do that, they do it like everybody does. Every now and then, when you throw an RPO slant and it works, it's like, how does that not work every play? Why don't you just have every play be an RPO, throw a slant? Right. Or a play action deep shot over the middle. Against Iowa State, Minnesota, which is the only 2 games that I care about, on play action, Cade McNamara is 12 of 17 for 103 yards passing, which is not great, but it's not terrible. And guess what? Every quarterback is better off play action. That's why they run it. Will Howard's better. Like, everybody is. Not play action, when it is a straight drop back, read the defense. Cade McNamara against Minnesota and Iowa State was 12 of 31 for 58 yards. It is less than 2 yards per attempt in normal American passing. By comparison, Will Howard against Michigan State, right? That's the comparison here. 7 of 10 for 67 yards on play action. But on non-play action, 14 of 21 for 177 yards. Cade McNamara cannot take a snap, drop back, read the defense, and complete a pass for more than 5 yards down the field. I think he literally maybe did not do that in either of those 2 games. It is worse than Michigan in terms of trying to throw the ball. So the only stuff that works is the run game gets going. Now we're running RPO or play action off the run game. I was blown away. And here's the thing. He's actually better against the blitz than he is when you don't blitz, because he wants you to blitz so that he has to take his first read and dump it off. Mm-hmm. So there'll be a play. Oh, there's a blitz in his face. He dumps it off to the running back, and the running back runs for 9 yards. And that's a 9-yard completion. Iowa State figured that out in the second half and just started dropping 8. I don't think it completed a pass. I can't believe how bad it is. I cannot believe this whole year I've been like, they're much better without Brian Ferentz. They can't throw an American forward pass, Landis. I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
I was, as you were talking, I was punching this in to Sports Info Solutions to see what it was. Among quarterbacks with at least 20 attempts that don't involve an RPO or a play action fake, Cade McNamara is 136th in the country at 5.4 yards per attempt. The guy that's 3 spots ahead of him is Mike Wright at Northwestern, who got benched because he can't throw the ball.
Yeah.
And they're like, it's bad. They do not have a functional passing attack.
And all of that's against Eastern Illinois. Everyone's, it's like the Iowa State game. They're like, oh, he played a good second half against Eastern Illinois. He threw 3 touchdown passes against Eastern Illinois. He hasn't thrown a touchdown pass since. He's played like a functional half against an FCS team throwing the ball. Mm-hmm. So they are awful. They are awful. He wants to throw a 4-yard pass. You'll see, like, they had a 3rd and 11 and he threw a 4-yard check down to the tight end. And like, he wants to do that. So Ohio State just has to stop. They should have 9 guys in the box. There is nothing. Jacob Gill, transfer from Northwestern, has been their best receiver. Caleb Brown, transfer from Ohio State, was suspended for the first game and Like they've been talking about
targets. Right?
He's not running his routes very well, so they're not throwing him the ball. They want to throw it to Luke Lachey, but it's not anything dangerous down the field. There's just nothing in the passing game. So I would say don't blitz, because make Cade McNamara search and find, and he can't. And don't blitz because you don't want to take a defender out of the play against the run. So rush 3 or 4, drop 7 or 8, and otherwise stop big explosive runs. And it is awful. And in terms of progress, it is better than Brian Ferentz, right? But last year, I wanted to check this. Last year, Iowa threw the ball 24% of the time on first down, which is not very imaginative. I was like, I'm sure they progressed. They have. Now they throw the ball 26% of the time on first down.
Oh, nice.
By comparison, Ohio State threw it on first down 40% of the time last year. This year, they're throwing it 47% of the time on first down. So nobody's 50. Other than Washington last year, right? It's like, most people run more on first down, but they're running 3/4 of the time on first down. And so Landis, I couldn't, I was watching this. I didn't feel bad. Did I feel bad for Brian Ferentz? It's not, this part of it is not better. So, but the Eastern Illinois stuff and a little bit of the play action last year, Deacon Hill's PFF rating for quarterbacks was last as the starting quarterback for Iowa, 87th of 87 in the power conferences. Cade McNamara is 46th of 79 this year. So statistically, but you watch it, oh my God. No touchdowns, 2 interceptions the last 3 games.
I did feel like in the Iowa State game, they were throwing it on first down early. And then once they got the lead, they were like, we're good.
They dialed it back. Well, they also, because they were in rhythm, they had a little bit of that back and forth of RPO play action sets up the run, that sets up that. And then once they got to that, Iowa State just started dropping 8. That's what they figured out. We're not going to blitz anymore. We're just going to drop 8. And once you figure that out, so I just think this is, not surprisingly, but it's worse than I thought it would be, is my main takeaway. So Davis and Igbenogson, Denzel Burke, Jordan Hancock when he's out there. This is an Ohio State show. You guys know who the Ohio State secondary is. I just don't think they're going to have anything to do, because I think you could put 5 mannequins out there and Cade McNamara would probably miss guys or take a check down anyway. So I don't know what to tell you. I can't believe it.
I do think there were a lot of questions about playing more press coverage and why Jim Knowles has played his corner so soft. I think this is a game where he can ask Davis and Igbenogson and Denzel Burke to challenge everything, because they're not afraid of Iowa's guys getting behind them, and they're not afraid of Cade McNamara throwing the ball down the field. So I think you'll see more of that.
Yeah. No, I think. And so I want to do this. I'm going to make a prediction. And so if you're a watcher, a viewer, or a listener of Kings of Columbus, and you're with somebody who also is that, you can look at each other on Saturday and elbow each other and say, hey, my prediction is the first play will be a play action bootleg rollout to the right with a quick little dump off to the tight end for 4 to 6 yards, because that is how they try to get. It reminds me of, again, it's what good play callers do to try to get lesser quarterbacks in rhythm. This is all Kevin Stefanski did with Baker Mayfield the one season. Everything was if it looked good, it's because it was a play action bootleg rollout on the move, no pressure in his face, couple different reads, take the short one, and it's it's a 7-yard gain. And then at some point that stops working. But please watch for that as a family. That's my prediction for Iowa's first play.
In 2022, when Iowa came to the shoe, its first play of the game, it tried to throw the ball, and Spencer Petras threw an interception.
Okay. So if they can just throw an incompletion, guys, let's go out. All right, guys. Okay. Whatever. Why banana? Let's go out there and throw an incompletion. Nope.
I'm looking at the drive chart. Iowa started that game. Interception, punt, fumble, turnover on downs. That was his first 4 possessions.
So so this is the 2-year anniversary. It's not the date, but it's the game of the day, the day when Kirk didn't like me anymore.
Yeah.
So,
you going to go? You going to go say hi?
So you know what? I really kind of want to go, but my daughter also has another band competition. So I don't know if I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. I don't know. She's a senior. She's a drum major. Marching band is very important to her. My new job allows me to be at more of those things. And so I want to be at football games, but don't have to be in the same way I used to have to be. And I think I want to go to the marching band competition. So I don't know if I'm going to be there, but I want to say hey to Kirk.
I'm going to go. I'll say hi to him for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Kirk. Doug says hello. That wasn't a Philly accent, but that really wasn't you. I didn't mean that. That's not how you sound. Do it how you would sound. Practice it right now. Hey, Kirk.
Hey, Kirk. Doug says hi.
Doug says hello.
Yeah.
All right. That's our breakdown. I think that Caleb Johnson will hit a couple things against the defense that will make Ohio State fans worried, reasonably so at some points. I would say I would pick at least two runs of more than 20 yards and some frustration, some maybe early frustration, but nothing consistent and almost nothing from the passing game. So that's my prediction for that side of the ball. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I don't know. Ohio State has only allowed 5 plays of 20 plus yards all year, and they've all been pass plays. They have not. Neither one of these defenses has allowed a rush of 20 plus yards this year. I think Caleb Johnson will probably get loose for 1 or 2.
Yeah,
and maybe one of them is even a score. But I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't trust Ohio State's defense based on what we've seen, at least from the start of games the last couple of weeks, but I will. I think they more or less contain it.
So I asked the same question, Ohio State defense versus the Iowa offense by those Brian Fremeau stats. Ohio State has the number 8 defense. Iowa has the number 82 offense. What's your level of confidence in the OSU defense? Again, the reverse was 8.1, 8.09. What's your guess for this, Landis? Confidence in the Ohio State defense versus the Iowa offense?
8.8.
8.27. So it's maybe closer than I would think, just the reputation of the Iowa offense. But I think people who watch us and listen to us know that we have a lot of respect for Caleb Johnson. I think that's it. He is a very, very good individual player. And their offensive line is pretty good in some ways, but the other part of it is so bad that I think you maybe could have voted more of a 9, maybe if you're an Ohio State fan. But I get it. You got to respect that dude. Like, you got to respect that dude, Caleb Johnson.
Does this feel like to you like some of the old Ohio State Wisconsin games when Wisconsin would come into it with the only thing it has going is a real dude at running back, but then Ohio State's pretty good?
I probably underestimated some of the Wisconsin guys over time. I have more respect for Caleb Johnson than some of those Wisconsin backs. So it does feel similar to me. I probably have, but I think you were more concerned with those Wisconsin offensive lines than this Iowa offensive line. So I think maybe Caleb Johnson is better than those Wisconsin backs, but I think those Wisconsin offensive lines had more NFL guys, were better than this Iowa group. So, but it's similar. It's similar in how the one-dimensional it is, and that, but even like a Scott Tolzien never scared anybody. And then Scott Tolzien's had like an NFL career. So, I mean, Cade McNamara is not going to have an NFL career. So, right. I think it's similar. And to your point, Ohio State typically handles that. Okay. When we come back, a little bit on Kirk Ferentz and a little bit from how the texters are feeling about Kirk Ferentz and the Hawkeyes next on Kings of Columbus. Back on Kings of Columbus. Thanks to you guys for being here. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Tell a friend. Give us a thumb. If you're listening back on a podcast feed, give us a rating, drop a review. We'd love to hear from you guys. We always appreciate all of that, and it helps us out. Kirk Ferentz, what do you think of Kirk Ferentz, Landis?
I think Kirk Ferentz is one of the best to ever do it.
Oh my God, you're such a kiss butt. I love Kirk Ferentz because I'm going to see him on Saturday, and I'm not going to say hi from Doug. It's very weird. And I'm glad they finally got rid of Brian Ferentz, because I think it now allows us to just talk about football and Kirk Ferentz, because it was such a weird thing and it was so aggravating and wrong, and it diminished his legacy. And he's had other things that have diminished his legacy.
Sure.
Rabdo, some stuff about dealing with some players. Like there's some real off-field stuff with Kirk Ferentz, which all goes back to King Kirk and doing things his way or the highway, which I think still is a problem. But at least they didn't let him employ his kid and hurt the program that way anymore. Mm-hmm. Because when it comes to like building a winning tradition and culture and philosophy, they're pretty good at it. But I do think sort of what I touched on before is the baseline that once upon a time, that was more dangerous to Ohio State than it is now. As Alex, one of our texters, said, the Ferentz way is incapable of beating talented teams consistently in the modern era. It's trestle ball with Earl Bruce recruiting. What do you think of that breakdown?
Yeah, I think that's right, because even obviously it didn't work well against Ohio State the last time Iowa played Ohio State, but even against Michigan, which wants to kind of play similarly with much better players, hammers them too, right? So I think the I guess just like influx of talent at the top of the conference has kind of neutered Iowa's way of being successful.
Yeah. Yeah, their version of and the weird thing is, like, it's a little weird that this game is in Ohio Stadium again, because it was just in Ohio Stadium 2 years ago, and Ohio State has not been to Kinnick Stadium since losing there in 2017.
They were supposed to go there in 2020, weren't they?
Oh, is that one of the COVID ones? Okay.
I think so, yeah.
But still, it's like, their place can be their style in their place. I also think is a different deal. But again, they've also had, Terrell Pryor had some wars with Iowa, man. Right? Mm-hmm. Like they had back-to-back years in 9 and 10 where it got taken right down to the wire. So, but I think those days are gone. Chris says, I respect Iowa ever since they thrashed us in 2017. That and Iowa blanked Kentucky. And as you said on the podcast, Kentucky is a powerhouse. So yes, you must respect Kentucky. Who is the best coach in Iowa history? Ferentz or Hayden Fry? Give me Fry every day of the week. Jack says that. My thoughts on Iowa is they have been a pain in the Buckeyes side when they have played them in Iowa, especially in 2017. I think because they played them sporadically over the years, it always seemed like a big deal, even when it wasn't. That's Scott in the 513. So there's such a vibe to Iowa that it is. I think if you ate Iowa as a meal every year, it's like, oh yeah, I get it. It's Iowa, right? But when you're only doing it every couple years and you're only going to their restaurant, the rest of the time you're ordering food and it's getting delivered in the mail. Instead of Omaha steaks, it's Iowa steaks. But then you go to the restaurant, it's like, oh, like in small doses, they can be difficult to deal with in their own way. But I think this is the game 2 years ago in Ohio Stadium a fair template for what people should expect for this game, even though we're doing like a big breakdown on it and that was a 44-point win? Is it close enough to think like, it's going to be in range of that?
I would say not quite that because of Caleb Johnson.
Okay.
I think probably closer to that kind of game than not, but Iowa has I think a much greater ability to score because Caleb Johnson is on its roster.
Okay. Mike,
Iowa's only touchdown in that game was a defensive touchdown. Like they got a sack fumble against CJ Stroud.
We have the graphic. So this is Kirk Ferentz 2-9. So in like 99 and 2000, when they played him, like Ferentz was just getting the program together. 2003 was close. 1910 Ohio State win. And then 2004 was the year everybody who never had beaten Ohio State beat them. Right. Iowa, Northwestern, the reset year. So that's one of them. But that was really, that was a good Iowa team. That was more about Ohio State. And then also the thing that's unfortunate of all of this is in 2002, both Ohio State and Iowa were 8-0 in the Big Ten and didn't play each other. So that might have been Ferentz's best team, went to the Orange Bowl, would have been great to have a shot against the Buckeyes. That would have been a fun game, right? And again, two similar styles back then. 2005, Ohio State by 25. 2006, Ohio State's awesome. It's a 3-score game. And then 9 and 10, it's super close. It's overtime and then a 3-point win. And then 2013, Ohio State won by 10. Iowa the win in 17 and 54-10 last year. So this is just right. And I do think there's a lot of fans, I think, Landis, who 9 and 10 sticks. You can see Terrell Pryor running on third down to save the game. Right. And the field goal at the end and celebration, that kind of thing. So there was a time when, it was quite a deal. It's just less so now. Eric says, I respect Kirk Ferentz's dedication to lost causes, which is, I like that. Tyler says, I respect Iowa. Ferentz should be shamed for the hiring of his son, but the man puts a consistent and respectable football team on the field year over year. Phil Parker is great. So I think that's right. He did this wrong, but the other things they do pretty well. Jeff says, I think Iowa's defense is amazing for matched or overmatched opponents, but when playing teams that have more talent, the defense can struggle a bit. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Yeah.
Logan says, I definitely respect the Hawkeyes. I think Ferentz runs a well-coached program and always the challenge to play. Obviously, keeping his kid employed too long and being stubborn, embracing modern offense has limited them, but I think they know who they are and are very good at it. Sometimes trying to evolve too much can set you back and not spring you forward, i.e. Wisconsin right now. I'm expecting a tough test, and I think 20.5 points is too many. We'll be pleasantly surprised if the Buckeyes cover Saturday. Wisconsin and Iowa are a great comparison here. I like what Wisconsin did because it tried to evolve. But if what is happening, I feel whatever is happening at Wisconsin, stubborn, set in his way, Kirk Ferentz is sitting in Iowa City saying, see? And he sort of said that at Big Ten Media Days. Like he preemptively, he's not second guessing this. He first guessed it. He was like, I don't know, man. And I was like, man, you got to try. A program like Iowa or Wisconsin is good enough to try to be more. Is Kirk Ferentz right, Landis? Don't try to be more. Be who you are. Be pretty darn good.
I actually think in that regard, Kirk Ferentz is mostly right. Like you can strive for a kind of like plus version of what you've been, but to kind of remake the entire thing when I don't think any of those programs like in the old Big Ten West are equipped to get the kind of talent that you need to run an offense like the one Wisconsin's trying to run.
Yeah.
Just seems like a losing proposition. So like you can become too stubborn. Clearly Iowa did. But I think Kirk is more along the right train of thought there. Like doing what they've done. Like I don't think the Tim Lester hire was all that impressive of a hire. I think Iowa probably could have swung a little bigger than that, and I think Iowa tried to, and couldn't. I would imagine there was some trepidation among offensive coordinators about what Kirk would actually let you do if you took that job.
Yeah.
But like adding stuff like the motions and shifts and some different formational stuff on top of what Iowa has done historically is probably a better way to go about it, I think, than what Wisconsin has done, which is just like scrap what has worked traditionally and really try to reinvent the offense.
Isaac says, definitely respect Iowa. Ferentz is to offense what Dabo is to the portal. Jordan says, the 2004 Iowa loss scarred me as a kid, and it was the moment I realized that sports are not always fun. That's crazy. That's crazy.
I don't know
crazy.
if Kirk...
So I hate Iowa.
I don't... Dabo is obviously portal averse. I don't know that like Kirk Ferentz is offense averse as much as he just like put way too much blind trust in his son who was overqualified. Because then like Iowa has not always been bad at offense.
That's true. That's true.
And like Kirk Ferentz is a very good offensive line coach. So like
he is. And I think Brian Ferentz might be a pretty good offensive line coach.
Yeah,
he just shouldn't be calling plays.
Yeah.
And he shouldn't be a quarterback's coach.
I think it was more about nepotism than it was not knowing anything about offensive football.
I do think there is, I think there's a lot in there like inherent of like too much power when you have a coach who's been around forever and thinks that he runs the program as a family business. Like hiring your son and keeping him like that is a symptom of a rot inside the program. No oversight, nobody, too many yes men, nobody checking him. But it doesn't, I agree. It doesn't mean that he doesn't know anything about football because that's wrong. Like he's incredibly successful. So
they have a style, right? Run the ball, punting is winning.
Yes.
That is not always aesthetically pleasing, but it works. It has worked for them. And I think it is the right style for a program like that. It's just, I think the Brian Ferentz stuff and like every criticism that Kirk got for it was deserved, but I think it like kind of skewed the view on Kirk Ferentz a little bit in a way that I think is slightly wrong when it comes to like football acumen.
Yes. No, I think that's right. Which is why like it was for his own good too.
Mm-hmm.
That had to happen. So, okay. So I think we have a handle on how we think this game will go. What Ohio State does best, what Iowa does best, what Iowa doesn't do best. But I was curious to ask our texters, Landis, as we look at the rest of the season, because again, hasn't been a super interesting first 4 games for Ohio State, but they have 6 of the final 8 that could be pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
This is the list I said ranked from toughest to easiest Ohio State's games for the rest of the regular season. So Mike has that graphic up. This is so you rank everything 1 to 8, and then the number like reflects like what the average rating was for a team. So Oregon is the toughest game at 1.5. That's like that's like everybody making them either first or second toughest. Do you agree that Oregon, and it's at Oregon, that Oregon is the toughest game remaining?
I have really gone back and forth between Oregon and Penn State. I think I'd put Penn State 1.
I think I would put Penn State 1 also. The one thing is the trip and the travel and the new environment that I think, and that Penn State's not a night game. So
those are all good points. Yeah, maybe that might tilt it. I think the football of it is close enough that maybe those circumstances might tilt it back toward Oregon.
But I think Penn State might be a more competitive, difficult football team to deal with for Ohio State than Oregon. That's what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I think on the football, I think we agree. On the football, we agree. On everything combined, maybe slightly Oregon. Penn State is second at 2.28. Michigan third at 2.83. I'm not surprised, Landis, but I was open to the idea of Michigan winning this because Ohio State fans think Michigan that's the most important game, and they've lost 3 in a row. And until you get back over the hump against Michigan, like, just the Michigan-ness of the question. Again, I think third on the football is correct, but I was open to the idea that Michigan was going to wind up first in this poll.
I don't know that I would have been floored by it. I think the football of it and the fact that the game is here in Columbus, I guess I'd be pretty surprised if that was number 1. And like, you just like watch Michigan on the Saturday, it's like, oh, they can't throw the ball. It's like, okay,
yeah,
it's just not a very threatening team.
So those were a clear top 3. Again, Michigan was 2.83. Iowa's 4th at 4.17. Indiana 5th at 4.93. Both games in Columbus. Who do you think is a tougher opponent for Ohio State, Iowa or Indiana?
I would say Iowa for right now because of what Iowa brings along the lines. I don't yet know what to make of Indiana on the offensive and defensive line. I would like to see them play some better teams first.
Is it possible? I'm going to say this. Is it possible that Indiana would beat Iowa, but Iowa would be a tougher challenge for Ohio State?
I think so. Yeah. I think that's possible.
That just like, Iowa's defense is always tough. Like, they've kind of been through this before. Caleb Johnson's a monster, but Curtis Rourke and that Indiana passing game is definitely better than what Iowa's doing. Indiana definitely has more dangerous receivers than Iowa. Curt Cignetti is also a really good coach and would maybe find a way to make that work. And the Indiana offensive line, and we're going to talk about this on KOTN a lot on Wednesday, is vastly improved from where it was a year ago. So like, I could see, but also like Indiana, a lot of those guys kind of have not been through this in the same way that I think like Jay Higgins for Iowa is going to come in and be ready for this in Ohio Stadium in a way that like Indiana, I don't know how they'll handle the moment in Ohio Stadium.
I think that's right. But I would also say that Indiana, given its sort of lack of experience and this particular position that it's found itself in, I think will play with a little more fire to it than Iowa. Like, I think Iowa is going to come to Ohio Stadium and play its game and hope that Ohio State messes around a little bit and that could be a close game. Indiana is going to come with some stuff, and I'm not saying it's going to work, but like Indiana is going to come to Ohio Stadium taking some swings at the Buckeyes and will play like it has nothing to lose. And Iowa State not really playing, or Iowa, is not playing for much either. But I just don't know that that's Iowa's style. And Curt Cignetti very much strikes me as someone who's not going to show up at Ohio Stadium like playing not to lose. He's going to come and try to win the game.
Nebraska is 6th on this list, and then it's Northwestern and Purdue, and Northwestern and Purdue are pretty non-competitive. Northwestern will be at Wrigley Field, so at least that'll be cool. Nebraska at 5.48. It's pretty far behind Indiana at 4.93. Certainly coming into the season, Nebraska would have been higher on this list. And when Dylan Raiola has played pretty well and they lost a close game to Illinois, I think Nebraska being 6th is reflective of this being a pretty tough Ohio State schedule for the rest of the year. Because if Nebraska is your 6th toughest game remaining, Like, that's a pretty tough, sixth toughest game, isn't it?
The top 6 teams on this list combined for 2 losses right now, right? That's it.
Michigan to Texas, Iowa to Iowa State, Nebraska to Illinois. Yeah.
3 losses. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Oregon, Penn State, Indiana undefeated. So,
yeah.
And legit. Like we just went through. We don't know what the deal is with Iowa. And, if we do this again for the Nebraska game, I don't know. I mean, on Kings of Columbus, are we going to do a version of these breakdowns for all 6 of these games? I think maybe we will. They might deserve it.
We could. I think as we stand here right now, I think they all deserve it. Well, maybe Nebraska or Indiana might lose another time or two before Ohio State plays them, but as of right now, I think so.
Yeah. So this is. I'm excited. Like, this will be fun, and as we said, it's one of these things, non-conference, conference, whatever. In the end, your schedule is your schedule. How many good, tough teams are you playing? And I certainly think you can say very convincingly that 6 of Ohio State's 12 games are against a pretty darn good opponents. And we'll see what Michigan State winds up being the rest of the year. Maybe that'll be 7. So that's our breakdown for this game. We'll do what you watching, what you eating, what you thinking on Kings of the North on Wednesday. So if you like that, you can go find it there. We also are going to talk more about Indiana. If you're interested in Indiana, we interviewed Mike Kadick, the 6th-year center for the Hoosiers. On Kings of the North, we interviewed Taylor Lehman, who covers Indiana, and talked to him about the vibe around the Hoosiers. And he also does a lot of data stuff, so sort of the inside numbers on Indiana football. And then Donovan Ezaraku, who is the national leader in sacks. Man, Landis, we got him. He's also going to be a guest on Kings of the North on Wednesday, so that will be an action-packed show.
Star-studded, some might say.
Plus, you're on it.
Plus, I'm on it.
Yeah, star-studded. Brown palette, pumpkin spice. No.
That's right.
All right. We appreciate you guys allowing us to be part of your Ohio State football fandom. Without the people who are watching and listening to this, Landis and I would literally be nothing. So thanks to you guys for always being here. We will catch you on Sunday for the Sunday Sound Off, where we will recap everything that happened with the Ohio State-Iowa game on Saturday. We'll take your text, your comments, and questions and run through those. We'll also see, hopefully, some of you on Saturday night live at 11 p.m. on YouTube for our KOTN post-game show. We certainly will work Ohio State, Iowa into that conversation because, as Landis says, it might be the best game of the weekend. But we'll talk about Washington, Michigan. We'll talk about Nebraska, Rutgers. We'll talk about everything else happening in Northern College football. Thanks, as always, to our producer, Mike Yorostowski, for making us look good and sound good. Hey, these palettes just don't make themselves happen, Landis. Someone's got to bring it all together. So it's a mustard kind of day. Go get some pumpkin spice. Fall is here. Enjoy the 87-degree weather. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Kings of Columbus on the podcast.